Crime, Wine, and Chaos contains adult language and graphic content. Listener discretion is advised.
I know you are, but what am I, Chaos Kids? I'm Amber.
I'm Rubber and you're Glue, and I'm Naomi. And this is Crime, Wine, and Chaos.
Yep. I was just thinking about Pee Wee Herman today.
I was like, is there a Pee Wee Herman theme going on, or you just pulled that one out of your ass?
Well, actually, I didn't realize that Mecca Lecca Hi Mecca Heiny Ho is an actual like Jewish, like part of Jewish scripture. And I was like, oh, that's probably problematic. Let's not
that's
open
probably
with that.
Problematic. I didn't know that either, but did I ever show this to you?
Stop it. You just had that at the ready. I have so many questions. Hold on.
Tell the Chaos Kids what I just held up.
It's the genie thing in the thing, and it says Mecca Lecca Hi Mecca Heiny Ho.
It's a sticker. It's a big old sticker.
Where'd you get that?
I don't know. I have it like a drawer in my drawer. I have a bunch of stickers. One of them I'm not going to show you because one of these days I'm going to remember I have it and I'm going to give it to you because it's for you.
I love that you literally are just like, oh, this right here. I'm like, yeah, that. Literally that phrase.
I wonder what it means in Hebrew. I wonder what that means.
Oh, there's no way to know.
No way to know.
Mm-mm-mm.
How are you, sister?
Oh, thank you for asking. I'm okay-ish. I'm running on about 4 hours of sleep. Ew.
Hate that for you.
That's okay. But you know what? We're just gonna do like leftovers tonight. So I'm not even gonna do anything after this, and I'm just gonna call it a night.
Who are you? And what have you done with my sister? Leftovers on a Tuesday?
I know. Never mind. I'll cook something. Now I feel ashamed. Oh, because I can't today. I'm
That's
done.
Fine. You know what? Most days I can't. So I get it.
Yeah.
We've talked about this. A lot of times my dinner is an apple and a bowl of popcorn.
I love that. I love that for you.
What do they call that? Girl dinner?
Girl dinner. Sure. God. Maybe I'll have that. I have an apple left and some popcorn. Maybe I'll have that.
It's a nice combo. The salty, the sweet.
Sure.
We talked about it before we started. I had to take the cat to the vet today. And you guys, having pets is rough sometimes. I love my cat, but man, I'm a little stressed, but I'm okay. We're going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay. That's me. That's what I got for you. And the sticker.
And the sticker. Oh man. Well, I'm drinking the same thing I drank last week because the bottle's still open and I can't recall what it's called. Petite something. There's an elephant on it. I'll link it in the show notes. It's a red. It's delish. Do you have a crime for me, sister?
I totally have a crime for you.
Oh God.
So, I went looking, you got me all digging in on the stats again lately on Buzzsprout. And I was in there and I realized, you know what? We've got a nice contingency of listeners in Australia. We've been down under a few times before on the show. And I thought, let's go back and let's do some wacky fucking weird or whatever fucking crime I've never heard of down in Australia.
Perfect.
And I found this one for you. So here we go. August 11th, 1994, which is subsequently like a month after the last crime I covered 2 weeks ago, which was Megan.
Do that sometimes.
It's weird, right? Megan Canick. Anyway, that was like a month later. So a month later, 1994, Lady Marion, which is a trawler, was out on the Hawkesbury River casting giant nets to fish for shrimp and squid. Hawkesbury River is north of Sydney in New South Wales, Australia. It and its main tributary, Nepean River, basically like encircle the northern metropolitan region of Sydney.
Okay.
Mark Peterson and his fishing crew were having a very good, normal fishing day. The waters were calm. They'd made their way upriver that morning, casting their nets as they went, with high expectations of a good haul that day. It was just before noon when they felt the familiar feeling of a heavy tug on their nets.
Oh, no.
Hey, you remember the last time we had a story where something was found on the water? It was really bad.
Yeah.
Oh. You've got that look on your face. Like, what are you doing to me, sister?
Yeah. I'm a little bit anxious. I'll just drink some more wine. Keep going.
But as they were pulling up on one of their nets, excited that the weight they were hauling up was a generous net full of lucrative sea life, they realized the net was snagged on a rope that was anchored by a steel frame or something like that. Mark would later tell the press, quote, "As I pulled it in, I saw there were plastic bags tied to it, and then I saw a bone stick out of one of the bags."
No. God, plastic bags is never good.
Never good.
Mm-mm.
Once the whole thing was out of the water and pulled onto the boat, it was clear that what this crew had found was a rusting steel-framed crucifix with a body wrapped in plastic attached to it.
A crucifix?
Kinda.
Oh, God. That's spooky.
So, of course, Mark called up the Broken Bay Water Police immediately, and they arrived to escort Mark and his crew and the boat back to Patonga Wharf. That is where an investigator inspected the find and confirmed that it was indeed human remains in those bags.
Oh, God.
An investigation kicked off in earnest, and forensic pathologist Dr. Chris Lawrence scoured the body for clues as to who this person was. The fingerprints had deteriorated significantly in the water, so the easiest path to identification was not available to him. But Dr. Lawrence did figure some things out. The corpse was a man, the skull revealing him to have been between 21 to 45 years old, and he died of blunt force trauma to the head. It was also determined from the length of the bones that the man was between 5'2" and 5'4" tall.
Oh, that's a short dude.
It's a short dude. That's what they say. We call him short kings, Amber.
Wait, what? What?
That's a short king.
Okay, what? I don't. Who's we and what do you mean?
Oh my God. You know what? You need to be on the internet more. It's all I'm saying. So the teeth were still intact. The man had no fillings, had his first right lower molar removed, possibly at a young age. From the shape of his bones, Dr. Lawrence concluded that the man's face had likely been somewhat misshapen.
From blunt force trauma, or like it just was?
I think it just was.
Oh.
With the help of a forensic anatomist and a forensic anthropologist, investigators had a facial reconstruction made of the unknown man. These things are always so creepy. They used the resulting 3D bust. You know how they do? Like, yeah. To create further enhanced computer-generated images of the victim. These images went out to newspapers, news programs, and were featured on Australia's Most Wanted. After this media blitz, John Doe was forever referred to by the Australian public as Rack Man.
I'm sorry. Because of what he was attached to?
That's right.
That's fucking awful. And also, that's awful. But also, if he has a misshapen face, that's pretty distinct. And everyone's just like, nope, don't know who that is.
That's right.
Okay. That's right. Okay.
That's exactly right. This wasn't enough for an ID. None of this was. So they did take DNA samples, but there just wasn't enough DNA for the technology at the time. DNA sampling and mapping was still relatively infant in 1994. So I think right? Like we're at that place now where we can do like trace DNA. I think back then, like you could do DNA, but you had to have a nice, generous sample.
Right.
There were just no leads on this man's identity or anything about what was found at the bottom of the Hawkesbury River. So while the remains were mostly skeletal, there was still clothes and some hair and tissue remaining on the body. At the time of his death, the man had been wearing an Everything Australia polo shirt, sized medium, dark-colored branded, no sweat branded tracksuits, also size medium, and a pair of Sparrow brand blue and white striped underwear. These were all very common brands in Australia at the time.
Yeah, No Sweat. I just had like a flashback of like the No Sweat brand.
Really?
Yeah.
It didn't ring a bell to me.
Oh, it rings like a Massimo bell, like that whole vibe.
Totally. Police did eventually track down the shirt manufacturer and find out that it was mass produced between the years 1982 and like 1986 and readily available at over 20 of the manufacturer's stores in the Sydney and surrounding areas. So that didn't really get them very much. His pockets had the remnants of a package of Benson and Hedges cigarettes and a pink lighter.
Okay.
And that was it. That was all the personal effects that were on him. No wallet, nothing else. Forensic biologist Silvana Tridico determined from hair samples that the man was dark-haired, Caucasian, likely from the Mediterranean or Eastern Europe. So when Emeritus Professor Donald Anderson of the School of Biological Sciences at the University of Sydney analyzed the growth of the barnacles on the metal frame, he said the rack was likely submerged for less than a year, but would not rule out that it could have been longer.
I didn't think about that. Barnacles. That's kind of gross.
Really?
Kind of.
Barnacles gross you out? Oh my God. Side note, I had to drive to the vet this morning and I was like, a couple blocks into my drive. The vet's very close to my house. And then suddenly and I mean gigantic moth came fluttering up out of the vent in the defrost vent area, like on the windshield, like inside the Jeep. And you guys, you don't know this. Amber knows this. Moths freak me the fuck out. Like no other, but I swear to God, I can handle almost any other bug before I can handle a goddamn moth. And this one was huge, Amber. It was big. It was this giant pajama. It was furry. It was
so uncomfortable right now. I hate that for you.
And I'm driving like, I just.
Oh no!
It flew over, like it fluttered up the windshield over, like left to like the window, like my driver's side window, and I was like, oh, and I was gonna like roll the window down, but then. No top on the Jeep. Well, I mean the top's up, but there's no right. It's open air back there. And then it passed by my face and it went out the back as I was driving, and it was gone. And
you didn't make eye contact with it, did you?
No,
okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay, I think you're okay.
Anyway, barnacles. So. Investigators believe the person who made this rack had access to these materials and the experience to build it. This was not an amateur job, meaning this was possibly a welder or metal worker of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
The steel crucifix was constructed using a piece of flat metal that was about 5 foot 10 inches long, with two cylindrical bars welded to it, one at the top and one at the bottom. Between the top and bottom cylinder bars, there were two pieces of rebar attached that had been bent into an L shape as if to prevent the body from falling off the device. So like, okay, it gets called a crucifix, right? But or a rack. But so I saw a drawing of like literally like a very rudimentary drawing of like the body on this rack, so that I got an idea of what it looked like. And it's like a piece of metal that's like maybe 6 inches wide and like 5 foot 10 inches long and like maybe 2 inches in depth, right? Think of it as almost like a metal version of like a 2x6, like a board, right? And then welded just down from each end of the length is a bar on either end, like a round cylindrical bar, like an inch or two in diameter, like a decent sized bar. And then two pieces of rebar attached at the center, kind of the center point of this plank, this basically steel plank, right? And then they are bent at 90 degrees. So it's like laying down on the ground, they'd be bent upright, right? But if it was like standing straight up and you were looking at it, they'd be bent towards you. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay.
Do you think, is this something that this poor guy was like tortured on, or do you think that the purpose of this was 100% to weigh him down in the water?
We don't really know.
Oh, God.
But the body had roughly been like anatomically arranged on the frame, suggesting that it had been attached in one piece. The body was secured to the frame with wire and orange rope. So like the top bar the body was secured around the neck and the bottom bar around the ankles. And then the arms were laying like straight down with both the the waist and the elbows attached to the rebar with rope and wire. And most of the body had been wrapped in one long sheet of black plastic, while an additional plastic bag had been used to cover the head. And based on where all the bars were in relation to the body, it was determined that this crucifix or rack or whatever had been specifically made for this man because everything lined up just right at those points.
Yeah.
So this was clearly a homicide, and this death was due to that blunt force trauma to the head. But because of the advanced state of decomposition, no other injuries to the body prior to the death blow could be determined, nor if he had been alive or dead at the time that he was attached to the metal rack and thrown into the water. Like that's how we don't know. We don't know.
Right.
Like, was it torture? Was it disposal? Like it seems like a really elaborate effort for mere disposal.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then began the theories of who this mystery rack man really was. Police even offered a reward for any information leading to his identification and the arrest of his murderers. Over time, that reward would eventually reach $100,000.
Shit.
Although the tips came in, there weren't that many, and there were even fewer of that were even worth anything. But there were plenty of theories. So one theory that a lot of people had that the police also theorized right out the gate was that this was mob activity. The building of the rack to those precise measurements spoke to a professionalism one would expect from organized crime. The weight of the rack itself, along with the requirement of a boat to get it where it was found, suggested more than one person was involved. Another theory was, of course, a cult, a ritual killing. The resemblance of the rack to a crucifix must point to a religious ceremony or dark practices, right? And while it is true that Australia was still deep in its own satanic panic at the time, there were 3 known cults within driving distance of the river that were all investigated prior to this for various violent rituals and crimes involving children.
Jeez.
There was the 12 Tribes cult, the Order of Charbal, and the Kendra Communications cult, each of which could probably be their own segment on Crime, Wine, and Chaos, but they checked out clean for this crime.
Okay.
There were some names of missing persons that came up that the police looked into as possible matches for Rackman. There was Christopher Dale Flannery, who was an alleged hitman, who was widely known in the underworld, as they say, as Mr. Rent-A-Kill.
Jeez. That's super chill. Okay.
Right?
God. A little too on the nose.
Little too. Look, they might be effective at their jobs, but mobsters aren't known for their creativity. It was believed he was responsible for as many as 12 murders during his career, including a couple of high-profile killings and the attempted murder of an undercover drug squad detective. He disappeared in May of 1985, just a few months after he survived an attempt on his life as he and his wife were about to walk in the front door of their house. Supposedly, the night before he disappeared, he received a phone call from some big mamma jamma Sydney crime boss who he had done work for in the past as a bodyguard. Many believe that crime boss murdered him at the meeting that was set up in that phone call.
Oh.
Of course, the problem being, it would be almost impossible for him to be Rackman simply because of time. This went down almost 9 years before the body and the rack was pulled from the river, and the most generous estimates for how long both those things had been in the water was 2 years.
Also, Rackman has some pretty distinct things going on with being what it a small king or whatever, and
Short king.
and,
Get it right,
and
sister.
possibly some disfigurement happening on the face. I mean, well, I don't know. So does this mob person have those characteristics too? I mean,
ultimately, dental records would definitively rule him out as a match.
All right.
Okay. Another name that came up was Greek businessman Peter Mitras. He had last been seen in the Sydney suburb of King's Cross in April of 1991, rumored to be involved in drug running in some way. And even though this time frame was slightly outside their window, they had also received information that Mitras had been beaten to death and dumped in the ocean somewhere off the coast near Sydney. But he was almost 10 inches to a foot taller than the body discovered on the rack in the river, and neither did his teeth resemble Rackman's at all.
Okay.
Stephen Bryant was another missing person that was looked into as a possible match. Stephen went missing in the town of Tukabia, which is about a 6.5-hour drive from Sydney, at the end of 1993. He was last seen by a neighbor on December 23rd. The neighbor invited Stephen over for Christmas dinner, but Stephen never showed up. The neighbor finally reported him missing like 6 weeks later, and when the police investigated Stephen's place, it looked undisturbed. Well, nothing was out of the ordinary.
Sure. God, fucking. I mean, he's 6 weeks late to dinner before the guy's like, something's weird. I better.
Who knows how close these people really were? You know, sometimes you invite people you're not even close with if you think that, you know, you're feeling generous on Christmas. You know what I mean? like, oh, well, come have dinner with us.
And then you're like, God, I hope they don't come. Because that would be weird.
Because we don't really know them that well.
Yeah.
Sad. So nothing was out of the ordinary except that he wasn't there, even though there was food in the cupboard, his clothes looked untouched, and the power and the phone were still connected.
Mm-hmm.
But the real red flag was that Stephen had not touched his bank account since a week before his neighbor had last seen him. No one's really sure why police looked at him as a possible match for Rackman, except that there was a rumor that maybe he'd been involved with some kind of drug deal or scam or ripoff that got him killed.
Oh, okay.
And then there were the two other missing persons that were like the most likely as far as the police were concerned. One was Joe Biviano, a convicted drug dealer. He disappeared from a Sydney suburb in December of 1993 and was 30 years old at the time. So he fits that very broad window. Mm-hmm. Beyond the time and place being within the right window to be Rackman, he was also dark-haired, of Mediterranean descent, and roughly 5'4" or 5'5". And with his criminal background, it was well within the realm of possibility that he could have gotten mixed up with some organized gang of some kind. The other possible match was a man named Max Tanchevsky, who was a heavy gambler and last seen in January of 1993 by his girlfriend, who he lived with in the Sydney suburb of Newtown. His girlfriend told police that at the time he went missing, he had $1,800 in cash on him, which was super common for him. He regularly withdrew large sums of cash from the bank so he could go gamble with it. Mm-hmm. She also told police that she did not report him missing right away because he often traveled to the Gold Coast to gamble and would be gone for a few days while on a binge. Max also fit the physical descriptions of Rackman: height, age. He was 37 at the time of his disappearance, hair color, and he was Eastern European in descent. But investigators couldn't link either of them. It's unclear if Max's dental records had been compared, but we do know that Joe's dental records couldn't be located for comparison.
Do they circle back to this disfigured face thing? Because I feel like that's a pretty distinct thing. Why? Okay.
And then years went by with no leads. Without being able to identify Rackman, a homicide investigation couldn't even really begin. If you can't identify the victim, how do you investigate their death? In 2005, with advances in DNA technology, police did get a DNA sample from one of Joe's relatives for testing against the minimal sample they had from Rackman, and it turned out not to be a match. So it wasn't Joe.
Okay.
And even though that didn't get them Rackman's identity, it ruled out one more person and convinced them that more advancements in DNA testing would eventually get them the answer. But that wouldn't happen for 13 more years when in August of 2018, just over 24 years after the discovery of Rackman's body in the Hawkesbury River, New South Wales police announced that Max Tanchevsky had officially been confirmed as the identity of Rackman.
Oh.
I guess the public didn't really clamor over this announcement, even though I'm sure there are peeps in the police department that felt pretty good about solving that part of the mystery.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's only half solved. Who murdered Max Tanchevsky still remains unknown, and the case sits with the Unsolved Homicide Unit for further investigation. It remains unclear if Max had ties to organized crime. His girlfriend told police back in 1994 that he did have gambling debts, but she had no idea how much he was in debt or to whom. It's possible he owed a lot of money to one or more organized crime groups. But the thing about that is that the manner in which he was disposed of was so elaborate for a gambling debt. And not only that, but typically injury is more likely than murder in these scenarios because the mobsters want to continue to squeeze money out of the person that owes them money, and a dead person doesn't pay their debts.
Right.
The latest article I could find was from back in March of this year, 2024, and the case is still unsolved. We don't know who killed Max or why, but at least we know who Rackman is.
Oh.
And that's it, sis. That's the unsolved murder of Max Tanchevsky, aka Rackman.
Wow. Fuck, that's awful.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah.
Rackman. What a horrible thing to be dubbed. I'm glad he,
Has an actual name now.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, sis. Are you ready for some chaos?
I'm so ready because you guys, she sent me a link to some audio because we couldn't get it to work on her microphone. So we're going to have to dub it in like in post, but I wasn't allowed to listen to it yet. And I'm really excited. I have no idea where this is going. So yeah, I'm so ready for some chaos. Please give it to me.
Well, this was a suggestion from my friend Celeste, and I'm so glad I researched this. Have you ever heard of a band called the Shaggs?
I'm sorry. The Shaggs?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Oh, good. Let me tell you about the Shaggs.
Okay.
Well, they were formed in Fremont, New Hampshire in the 1960s. And at the time, Fremont had less than 1,000 people. It's described as a drowsy, unexciting place that misses out on everything and not a likely town to produce a band that makes a name into the mainstream or produce a band at all.
I was going to say, I mean, they didn't make it that far to the mainstream. I've never heard of them.
Oh, no. So it's in the middle of nowhere. You don't need to pass through it when trying to get somewhere noteworthy, The primary jobs in Fremont in the 60s were dairy farming or barrel building.
I'm sorry. Barrel building?
Yes. That was a whole ass career.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure that there's an art to the original, building of barrels.
Sure. Of course. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And entertainment consisted of square dancing and sledding. God.
Whenever someone mentions square dancing, I just have flashbacks to middle school and it's traumatic and I can't. Also, Elvira, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Did every school have that same weird, creepy guy that emceed the square dancing?
I feel like our square dancing was literally just led by the gym teachers, which is, I mean, in its own way, way, way worse.
That's true.
What? Why did gym I can't. Okay. Anyway, keep going.
I don't know.
Square dancing and sledding.
Square dancing. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to talk about Austin Wiggin.
Wiggin? I love it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So Austin's mom was a fortune teller. And one day she reads his palm and tells him, "You will marry a woman with strawberry blonde hair. You will have children with this woman, and your daughters will go on to form the greatest musical group in the world." So Austin grows up to be pretty quiet, conservative dude. And as a young man, he meets a woman named Annie with strawberry blonde hair, and the two get married.
Okay.
They went on to have, I think, 3 boys and then also 3 daughters, Helen, Betty, and Dorothy, who goes by Dot.
Okay.
And when the girls were old enough, Austin put them in music lessons.
Okay. He's like self-fulfilling prophecy here, right? He's trying to do like a self-fulfilling prophecy thing.
Yeah. But he gets real Joe Jackson. He gets real Joe Jackson on us here.
Sure. I saw that. Yeah, I can totally see that coming. Yeah.
Okay. So by the time they're teenagers, he pulls them out of school so that they can focus on music. And the girls they're not even interested in pursuing music. They're not interested. They don't like it.
God.
But Austin believed that his mom's palm reading was the gospel, so he forced them to continue with music. This is weird, but like they were also like deeply religious, and none of them had ever been allowed to see or hear popular music, but they were expected to be able to play it.
This is giving Duggars all over again. What? Scientology? It's like, okay.
So he named the trio the Shaggs.
That's a really unfortunate name.
Mm-hmm. It was after a popular haircut at the time.
It's also
Shag, you're rotten, baby.
I mean, 3 young girls, there are 3 teenage girls in a band called the Shaggs, when at the same time that it's a popular haircut, it's also like slang for fucking, is like really.
But I have a feeling that Dad Austin probably wouldn't know any slang. And
Fine.
the girls might not either, to be honest.
Oh, I'm sure the girls didn't know.
Yeah.
Ugh, it's just really unfortunate.
Yeah. So he never allowed them to go to any concert. So they had no idea what a concert even looked like, but they were supposed to be able to perform one.
This is okay. It's so weird. Okay.
It's so weird. So eventually he starts homeschooling them. It like takes them out of school altogether, and he forces them to practice music all day. And he's a dick about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't allow any of the girls to date until they were 18, and they weren't allowed to do anything with friends. I don't know that they actually had friends, but if they did, that was a hard no. No.
Okay. But make some really fun, catchy music and make people have a good time, even though you've never actually done that in your whole life.
I can't wait until you hear.
Okay.
So on Friday nights, the family went grocery shopping together, and on Sunday, they all went to church. And these were the social activities.
Mm-hmm. Do we know what denomination they were in?
No.
Okay.
The rest of the time was spent playing music.
Mm-hmm.
By the mid-'60s, rock and roll was thriving, and the Beatles hit the scene. And Austin was convinced that the Shaggs would be even bigger and that the Beatles were just a phase.
Unpopular opinion. I kind of wish the Beatles were just a phase.
I know. But he clearly doesn't have the clairvoyance that his mom had.
No, he doesn't. Nor does he have an ear for these things, obviously.
Mm-hmm. So in 1968, Dad books their first show in town, even though the daughters felt like they weren't ready for this. But at the time, they had been a band for 3 years. So it's like, if you've been practicing for 3 years and you're not ready to go on stage, I think you're doing the wrong hobby.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely wrong hobby, and definitely not a career then, you know?
No. Oh, and this particular show in town was a competition.
Oh, no. I mean, that would, okay. Yeah, like right out the gate, their first live performance is okay.
Okay, so all 3 of them, they play it. Well, they were holding on to instruments that they could barely play. It was 2 guitars and a drummer. And then I'm not really sure who's singing or if they're all singing. It's hard to say. They opened with a country cover song and the audience started throwing garbage at them.
Oh, that's mean. To like 3 teenage girls?
Yeah. It was super bad. The girls were embarrassed, but Austin tells them not to worry. They just need to keep practicing.
Oh my God.
Later that year, they played a show that was received a little bit better, but that was at a nursing home. So,
I mean, I don't want to laugh at these girls. This is abuse. This is awful. This is so awful for them. These poor girls.
I'm sorry. No, I'm not laughing at them. I'm laughing at it's just so wonderful. So the nursing home performance was pretty. They received some polite applause, but who knows? Like maybe the audience couldn't hear them.
Or was just happy to have something to do that afternoon, you know?
Yeah. Oh, so even though they're terrible, they are able to land a Saturday night residency at the town hall.
What?
Well, it's the town of 100 people where people go grocery shopping for fun.
1,000, but
oh,
still.
Sorry, 1,000. Well, maybe 100 that are actual teenagers that are going to show up here.
Right.
And so they've got a residency. Like so, it's Vegas.
Right? I mean, look. I did time out because look, I always want to support the arts. I absolutely want to support local art. I absolutely, right? Like these are things that all communities need, right? So I don't want to, I mean, props to this tiny town for having the, inclination to have music in residency at the town hall to begin with.
I
you
mean,
know what I'm saying? Like I'm trying to be generous here, but like
nice
I'm also being genuine. Like there is something really sweet about that to me.
Of course, absolutely.
This town is doing that to begin with.
Yeah, for sure. So they've got their residency, but they're also the only band in town. So everybody who is, a teenager or a young adult turns up for these gigs, for all of the gigs. And at the gigs, Dad Austin was there with a homemade pin that he made to attach to his shirt that said Shag Manager.
Oh, that's okay. Again with the double entendre here. I can't.
Okay. So
you know what? Never mind. I'm just making a note to self about a pin I need to have made.
The Shag Manager.
Shag Manager.
Ooh, merch.
100%.
Oh, okay. So the whole family would go to the shows, right? And so the brothers were there too, and the brothers weren't musicians, but they would play one brother would play the tambourine and another would play a drum solo during intermission.
I'm sorry.
And I don't know.
How long did you get this story?
Listen. Okay, first off,
whoever documented this small town America story is just like a fucking gem. Just like national treasure. Whoever made sure that we get to know this story is a national treasure.
Okay, but first off, I don't know how long intermission is, but even if it's just 5 minutes.
That's a long ass drum solo.
When that's the only instrument being played and it's somebody who doesn't play an instrument. Just think about everybody just chill out for a little bit while the girls get a drink. And then it's just like fucking, I don't even know.
So good.
One regular attendee said they found the Shaggs music torturous, but there was nothing else to do.
Oh my God. This is so bad.
I mean, if it makes you feel better, these 3 women are still alive and they don't feel any type of way about this.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Okay.
They're vibing. Okay, so Despite this, Austin was certain that they would be the greatest band of all time, and he kept pushing their career. He didn't have much money, but he is able to scrounge enough to buy an inexpensive camera, and he starts recording the live shows to send out to potential producers. And it's the same show every Saturday.
Over and over and over again?
Yeah. It's so funny because in one point in like my research, it talks about their debut album, but they only ever made one album. So it's like, no, it's just the album. There's nothing else.
But you know what? You know what? They made an album, and I bet you money. I bet you money for record collectors, even though no one wants to actually listen to it. I bet you money that album is fucking worth bank if you can find a copy.
Oh, we'll get there.
Oh, we'll get to that. Okay. Because you know I know a little bit about that. I know a little bit about that scene.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so he's sending the same live show out over and over and over again, and nobody wants to bite. And so then Carson
doesn't want to have the Shaggs on his show.
No. So this is when he decides that they need to get into the studio and record an album.
Right. Yes.
So he pawns a bunch of his things off. He works extra hours, and he did everything he could to save enough money. And eventually, in March of 1969, they're able to go into the studio to make their debut album, Philosophy of the World.
Is Dad the one writing all the songs?
Oh no, they're writing their own songs.
Oh,
I Oh, we'll get to that. So they get to the studio. One of the audio engineers politely suggests that maybe they aren't quite ready to record. But Austin said, quote, he wanted to get them while they're hot.
Okay, look, that's really gross coming from their dad / shag manager. Okay, that is grossing me out. This guy is.
Oh. Another engineer said that as they started to record, him and some of the other producers that worked at the studio shut the door to the control room, and they were rolling on the floor laughing.
Oh,
but the band couldn't hear them. They were blissfully unaware. One of the more popular songs on the album was written about their cat who they loved. And the song is called My Pal Foot.
I'm sorry, is the cat named Foot?
Yeah, that's their cat and their pal. So I want you to go ahead and give My Pal Foot a listen.
Oh, now I get to go listen.
Yeah, okay. And you just listened until you feel like you got it. Oh, hey, Chaos Kids, Amber
hold,
here.
Please.
So as it turns out, embedding the audio file for My Pal Foot into the show is a no-no due to licensing laws. So I have gone ahead and provided the link to the YouTube video in the show notes. I encourage all of you to pause the episode now, go check that out, and then meet us back here for a debrief.
Wait, because I'm on YouTube, you guys, listening to this insanity. Amber's crying. She's laughing so hard. And the top comment on this video says, the top comment says,
oh no.
I can't. I'm dying. The top comment on this YouTube video with 9.9 thousand likes says, I set this as my alarm. Now I wake up 5 minutes earlier.
Oh my God. Oh God. It's okay.
Oh my God.
It just sounds sounds like I don't even know how to describe it.
No, I mean, no, it literally sounds like a combination of like a band warming up and doing a sound check with just random fucking sounds. And like a 10-year-old telling a story. I can't.
Oh my God. Ooh, it's so good. It's so good. And that was their best work. That was multiple takes. That's not a warm up. That's the studio version.
Debut album.
Debut. Okay. So they keep playing week after week until 1973 when they were finally given the boot from their residency. But the girls were relieved to not have to keep doing this because they didn't want to. And Austin is pissed. And at this time, they're not girls anymore. They're young women. They're in their 20s. They want to move on and have a normal life. One of the daughters even secretly gets married. And when Austin found out, he was pissed and pulled out a shotgun on her husband.
Holy shit.
Uh-huh. And when the police responded, they told the daughter that she needed to choose between her husband and her dad. And so she chose her husband and left.
Good for her.
Mm-hmm. Fuck.
I mean, it was that time still where like, you know, women's like their options were those were their options. So like she chose the husband. That doesn't necessarily mean that he was great or anything. You know what I mean? Like that's how she was getting out of her house, was like getting married and becoming another man's property. But I digress.
So it would be several months before Austin even spoke with her again, but eventually they did. In 1975, Austin had a heart attack and passed away at the age of 47. It was after his death that the sisters stopped playing altogether.
47? That is young.
Well, when you're the Shag manager, I mean, that's a stressful life.
I mean, I actually had a friend that I used to work with at Microsoft who like died unexpectedly of a massive coronary in his living room when he was like 47.
That's so scary.
Those are the kinds that like you almost can't even predict. You know what I mean? Like those are like, I would almost say those are like the genetic ones that are just like you've got something going on that's just ticking time bomb. You know what I mean?
Yeah, don't get me started on that. That takes me down a rabbit hole. As you know, I have a close friend whose husband died before, I don't think he even made it to 40, of a brain tumor. And it's this whole thing of like, if MRIs and CAT scans and ultrasounds were a part of our normal annual physicals that we do, that would have been caught. But that's too expensive, right? And we're not going to do that. We're going to let you just have a time bomb that could have been detonated years ago, and now you're dying at the age of 40. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's okay.
I'm just saying 47 is, even for a man, that's really young to just drop dead of a heart attack. Like that's.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so when they did this studio thing, because this was the late 60s, early 70s, and so you actually paid for the vinyls or the 8-tracks or whatever to be made.
Right.
And at the time, Dad Austin paid for 1,000 of them. And it was sort of unknown where they went. They didn't sell at all, right?
Right.
So it is believed that whomever bought the studio or the building or whatever came upon these in a box in the 80s, and it was like released to the public. So it's then that they kind of get like a cult following in the late 80s, and Philosophy of the World was notably Kurt Cobain's favorite album. It's accepted in the art community as basically being so bad that it's interesting and unique. And they didn't follow any rules of music at all.
Right.
And, you know, there's some people too, like, and this isn't true, but when it's the super artsy fartsy type are like, they were doing that on purpose because they're so brilliant.
Right.
Like, you regular folks don't understand. It's a thing of like, when you see a painting that looks like a toddler spilled paint and people are like, isn't it just brilliant? I'm always like, I'm missing something. It's like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So now they've got this cult following. They're accepted in the art community. Depending on who you ask, the Shaggs were either the best band of all time or the worst band of all time. One music fan claimed to be, quote, in the fetal position, writhing in pain. He called the Shaggs hauntingly bad and added, I would walk across the desert while eating chocolate briquettes soaked in Tabasco for 40 days and 40 nights, not to ever have to listen to anything Shag related ever again.
Wow.
And that's the Shaggs, the best, worst band of all time.
Holy shit, sister.
So good.
That is amazing. And so now those 1,000 vinyls are really worth money. I was right.
Yeah,
I was right.
They're hard to find. Like they've been reproduced, but even the reproduction is hard to find.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because Sebastian's grandpa was in a band in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And they were called the New Tweedy Brothers.
Okay.
And they went down to, Sebastian's grandpa was from Portland, and he moved down to San Francisco to the Haight-Ashbury in like the Summer of Love, or just prior to 1966.
Mm-hmm.
And 1965, 1966, and was like in the scene, right? Sebastian's dad famously was, held by Jerry Garcia and screamed and cried because he didn't like Jerry Garcia.
Oh, okay.
And Sebastian's grandmother, his dad's mom, she followed Sebastian's grandpa down there because she was pregnant. And she was like, nope, I'm coming. And she got a room with the first singer of Jefferson Airplane.
Shit.
Before they replaced her with Grace Slick.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sebastian's grandpa was in this band and they were playing all over town. And then he pissed off Bill Graham, who was the booker, who was like the kingmaker, right? Like at the time. So they stopped getting booked. But before that happened, or somewhere in the midst of all that, they pressed an album. They recorded and pressed an album.
Wow.
And it had this like really psychedelic, interesting, unique sleeve for the album as well. And they were on some of those famous posters, those paper posters that people collect from that time of like the billings for the different shows and stuff like that. But anyway, at some point, like years ago, I remember that Sebastian's grandpa had he had found a bunch of the sleeves.
No way.
Yes, they were like flat. They hadn't been like put together. They were an interesting, like different shape. They weren't square. They were like anyway, so he found somebody because somebody got in touch with him because he found out around that time that like his album was like coveted for collectors of that era of music.
Wow.
And so they pressed new vinyl and used the old, like the still in good condition, like the found sleeves, and they pressed new vinyl for them and they sold them. And it was like a whole thing. But like, yeah, there's like a whole niche of collectors that collect weird shit like that because it's ephemeral, because it's limited, because it's one of a kind, one off, like one hit wonder, whatever. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. That's so cool. I had no idea. Well, yeah, maybe we can all try and find our version of Philosophy of the World by the Shaggs, their debut album.
I think I'm good.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure my pal Foot is all I needed.
Well, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and add some to the playlist, and I'll have that rolling when you come over on Saturday. How about that? No? Okay.
Oh. Well, sister.
Yes, we sure did. Go sign up for our Patreon if you want. There's more where this came from.
There is more where this came from. Patreon.com/crime, wine, and chaos. It's $5 a month to be a Chaos Kids Club member, and you get a free bonus episode every month. We give you the new episodes a day earlier than everybody else, and we do a virtual wine night sometimes where we just hang out and we chit chat. We've been talking about other things we might do for the Kids Club members. So you can do that and support the show that way. You can go and, rate us wherever you listen to us. Or, if you're on an Apple product, you can type up an actual review on our podcast there, which we love. You can send Amber love letters. You can send me hate mail, but they all go to the same account. It's crimewineandchaos@gmail.com.
Yeah, and maybe possibly some Shag Manager stickers in our future. I don't know.
Or pins. Come on now.
We're classy here. Pins. Sorry. Well,
Sister, that was
so chaotic. Goodbye.
I love you. Bye.
I love you too, and I love my pal Foot.
Goodbye.
Bye. Crime, Wine, and Chaos is produced by 8th Direction Records. Artwork by Joshua M. Davis. Music by Paul Abner. If you would like to support the show, you can visit our Patreon page at crimewineandchaos.com/Patreon. Cheers!
We call them short kings, Amber.